Okay, so here's the idea, right? Is we already did this like staging part where really what we're doing, you can imagine we have sources of our data, like, we get contacts from RDS, and we also get like some contact data from HubSpot, okay? And you can kind of see here is that, well, we have the same person, right? In both one, some coming from our database, and then we also have this individual coming from HubSpot. And what frequently occurs is that you get some information from one data source and other information from a different data source. So in this example, you can see that like we have the phone number from RDS, but we don't have the phone number from HubSpot, okay? And you can imagine like maybe there's another thing like address here. And that maybe we have the address from HubSpot, but we don't have it from RDS, okay? This is null. So what do we want to do? Like, how do we want to resolve this? Like, so ideally what would happen is, we would basically just get one record, right? But it would have all the information in it, okay? So like our end result, kind of like what we want is to have this, and then to actually have, here we have the phone number, and we want the address over here. Let me move this. So this is kind of like, this is our staging, right, where we just took our source data, cleaned it up a bit. And then this is our goal, I think, for like integration, where we merge this data where possible, like we'd only get one record, but we have all the information, right, combined from both sources, okay? So our way to do that, like the way that you'll see that we'll do that, is we can select all, we can do this. We can select all from contacts RDS, and then do a union all on select all from contacts HubSpot, okay? What that will do, the union all, it will stack the two select statements together. So you can see that here, right? It will, this has, our RDS data, but it also has our HubSpot data, okay? So now we can have these things essentially in one, think of it like as a table or like a select, right? The result of this select. You can see here, like I put them one after another. That's just like to make it visually a little easier to see. But like when you perform the query, it will be all the RDS data followed by all the HubSpot data. Okay, so it will be all of this and then stacked on top of it, all of that. So that's like the first step, is first stack this together. And then what we, essentially the point, once you do this select, you can do, you can then group by something that you expect. Like, how do I know this is the same individual? Well, like we can see the phone, like basically the first name and the last name. We don't want to use the phone number probably because maybe if we don't have the phone number in one of the cases, well then we're not going to see that this is the same person. So it's kind of like the minimum amount of information that we think both data sources will have, whereby we know it's going to be the same individual. So in that case, we'll do a group by first name, comma last name, okay? And now so that will group it, but remember, if we're doing something like Snowflake or using Postgres, really any SQL database, we need to have, either we need to be grouping by that a column, or we need to take an aggregate, right, if we're using a group by. So, okay, so really what I would do is this. Say with merged contacts as parentheses, closing parentheses, and then say select all from merged contacts, and then instead of select star, right, we can do first name last name. And now, in order to, basically what we want is the present values, right? Like we don't want to save the null value if we have the actual phone number. So to do this, you'll just use max, right? Because when you get a null and we have a present value, it will select the present value, right? So we'll do select first name, last name, comma, max, phone. All right, as phone. Right? And what that will result in is this, where you have, we don't need to group by we don't need to do the max of first name, last name, because if we're grouping by it, there's only one per group. This is consistent. But here we have this, and the null. So if we take the max of it, it leaves us with just this guy. All right? And we can do the same thing for any other kind of columns. And where they're both present, like taking the max will just result in, just one of them. So it's fine. The only thing you have to worry about is the data inconsistent? So that, maybe you could do a check of that beforehand to see. But this is the general strategy, all right, is that, we have these two different data sources. We want to get the present values, from each data source. And the way that we'll do that is with a union all to stack these. And then we'll do a group by, right? Where we kind of feel confident that this is the same record, right? So maybe if this was like a really large database, maybe this wouldn't be enough. Like maybe we would also need the city, right? Like maybe, there's a lot of Sam Smiths. They're from, or Facebook or something. Probably just grouping by the first name and last name wouldn't be enough in that case. Maybe telephone number, if that's something our product requires, maybe that would be really what we want to group by. But the point is, group by something where we're confident it is that person, it's the same person. And then in order to get the present values, just take the max. Okay? So let's try this in DBT. Oh, shoot. I should have removed some of this. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing, right? I have the HubSpot contacts, and then I'm taking the RDS contacts, and then I didn't do too much. Right now, I'm just selecting each of the column names, right? Each of the columns, contact ID, first name, last name, phone, company ID. And then the same thing here. This thing, it actually doesn't matter if you call this different, if these names don't line up, because it's going to, with like Snowflake or, our database, it's just going to line up the columns. It doesn't really look to see that they're consistent in terms of the name. But that I point that out because you should just be careful about that these are in the right order. Because if that's what it's really doing, it's just stacking the first column with the first column, the second column with the second column. So we'll just do this, select as contact ID. So now they're both contact ID. I'll preview it. And you can see down below here, I'm selecting, all these from this table, from this CTE. So you can now see how this works, right? We have this, right now the stage we're at is kind of this stage. All right, so let's just see that. So if we scroll down, we see we have our, all of our HubSpot stuff, and then down here we finally get our RDS data stacked on top of it. Okay, and then we can actually what I want to do next, there is one kind of issue with what I said we would do next is then group by, right, to rule out the null values and just hold on to the present ones. One place we where this technique is kind of going to fall down is with our contact ID, because we only have we have this RDS contact ID, we have the HubSpot contact ID. They're going to be present in both cases, essentially always, because we're generating them, right? And we want to hold on to them in both cases. Like if we take the max, it's just going to, I think it would just take all of our RDS IDs because R is larger than H, right? And we're going to lose all of our HubSpot IDs. And this is valuable to us because, if we want to join in data that's available, like if we want to find, let's say a contact belongs to a company or a contact, there's like an order that a contact made, and we have that information in HubSpot but not RDS. Well, we're going to want this foreign key. So what we'll do is we'll say we're going to break out this into two columns, like the RDS contact ID and the HubSpot contact ID. All right. And then we'll have the RDS contact ID. Here will be present. All right. And then when we get to this record, so with this record, it's present. Because remember, this is a union. So we're, selected. First, we have the RDS contact, and we have something present here. And what we want to have under this record, right, is for it to be null. And then when we get to our HubSpot record, we want, we have it present, we have the ID, but we don't have the RDS ID. Okay, right? Because you can see that we're just stacking these on top of each other. If we break this out into two columns, then where we have a HubSpot contact ID, this guy will have a present record. But then when we get to the RDS contact ID, obviously there's no RDS contact ID for this record at this point. So this will be null. And then this will also be null. Okay? And then in this case, this will be null and this will be null. All right? So we'll have these, this will sometimes be present and sometimes be null. But that's okay for this stuff. All right. So how do we get that? How do we kind of get this null value, and in these, now we have this two columns. So what we'll do is okay, this is my HubSpot contact. So my contact ID is really my HubSpot contact ID. Okay. And then I have this customer ID, which is really my RDS contact ID, right? Because it's coming from RDS. The other thing I need to do, now we have a mismatch in our columns, right? We have this HubSpot and we have the RDS. If we're stacking these on top of each other, they both need to have the same number and same kind of columns. So what we'll do is we'll say HubSpot contact ID, comma, null as RDS contact ID. Okay? So now all the HubSpot, every row that comes from HubSpot, we'll just have that null value here. And we'll do the same thing over here, comma. So this will be we want to keep these in the same order. So it'll be null as HubSpot contact ID, comma, customer ID as RDS contact ID. So in this case, we're pulling the RDS data. We have null values for the HubSpot ID, and we have present values for the RDS. In this case, we're pulling the HubSpot data. We have present values for the HubSpot, null values for the RDS. Let's see. And now we want to select both of these. HubSpot contact ID, comma, RDS contact ID. Let's see what results. Okay, that's not what I wanted. Did I mess something up? We're getting null values for first name. Select contact ID.
I think the final select statement needs a comma between contact ID and first name.
Thank you. Let's save that. Okay, this is what we wanted, right? So here we have a HubSpot contact ID for my HubSpot data, and we have nulls down here, and then towards the very bottom, right, now it switches. Okay? And when we finally do the group by, we're gonna get back to present values, right? Because we'll have the present value from here, and when we take max of this guy will stick. And we take max of this column, the present one here will stick. So that should be good. let's do the group by now. So we'll do group by, first name, comma, last name. And we can do max of the HubSpot contact ID, max of the RDS contact ID, RDS contact ID. I'm just giving it an alias. First name, last name. Let's leave it. And we'll do max of phone. So same logic, where that's present, we want to hold on to it as the phone. And then we'll preview it. Oh, did I do a group by? I did. Break this up. All right, so this is starting to get there, right? You can see that here we've grouped by, the first name and last name, and essentially where this was a null value, because we took the max, then we got the RDS records value, and where this was a null, because we took the max, we got the HubSpot records value. And same thing down the line. There must have just been a null value across both sources. That's honestly the gist of it. I mean, the only other thing we need to do is kind of apply the same logic with the other foreign key, which was the company ID. So you just do, let's just do it one more time. Company ID as RDS company ID. Oh, HubSpot as HubSpot company ID. All right, and then down here in comma, null as RDS company ID. So again, in this case, we can hold on to the foreign key at this point from both of our sources, and that will allow us to join to other tables later on. All right, and then we'll do the same thing down here. So we want first name, phone, company ID. We want to keep the same order, so it'll be null as HubSpot company ID. Just remember, you have to keep the same order, otherwise things will get messed up. Comma, null contact ID as RDS company ID. All right, and then let's save it, preview it. And I broke it. Invalid identifier contact ID. It's complaining line 10, which is null, select null. It's HubSpot contact ID. I bet you I forgot a comma or something. First name, last name, phone, company ID as null as RDS cup from Hub, union all. Select null as HubSpot contact ID. Okay. Customer ID as RDS contact ID. These look right. First name, last name, phone, null as HubSpot contact ID. Oh, null as HubSpot company ID. Here we have phone, company ID as HubSpot company ID. That looks good. Null as RDS company ID. Contact ID from RDS contact ID.
Should that be company ID, where you have selected it?
Where are you down here?
Where you have your cursor.
Maybe you're right. As RDS, null as RDS company. This is null as HubSpot company ID. Then we want the RDS stuff, right? Yeah. So this is off. So we want company ID as the RDS company ID. Yeah, that's right. Let's save this. It's because in this case, when we're doing RDS, yeah, the company ID we want to reference as the RDS company ID. So let's try this. Unexpected RDS company ID. I wonder if down, we have it in both cases. Null as RDS company ID, from HubSpot context. Company ID as RDS company ID. I wonder if I build it. Sometimes I'm doing compile to see if it's any easier to read in like the actual SQL. Let's see. Select contact ID as HubSpot contact ID. Okay, null as RDS contact ID, comma, first name, last name, phone. Company ID as HubSpot company ID, null as RDS company ID. That looks good to me. Union all. Select null as HubSpot contact ID, customer ID as RDS. Okay, that looks good. First name, last name. Null as, oh, look, I'm missing oh no, there's my phone. Null as HubSpot company ID, because I'm in RDS. Company ID as RDS company ID. Looks good. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. No. Company ID. Well, I was close, guys. Let's see. Yeah, I'll see if I can debug it later on, but I don't see it at this point. But I think you all get the gist of it. Like this is a technique you want to use for debugging. I do recommend. I mean, one thing I could just show you is sometimes it is. Lots of times it is nicer to debug by like running this, because just the error messages can be a little bit better. Let's just see if there's any help here. But I want to see this completed successfully.
I think the error might have been from selecting. Like I think you had left it selected, so it was just previewing the text you had selected.
Oh, really? So if I don't select it, like have any text highlighted?
Yeah, it's like kind of like Snowflake where you can select it and just run that query, and it'll
Wow.
do the same thing.
Okay, so that seems to have been right. All right, so that was, I guess, the issue was I was like highlighting something, and it was only running that. I did not know that. Cool. All right, so this seems to be working now. And we just want to also select our HubSpot company ID and our RDS company ID in the final statement, and probably take a max of both. So I'm just naming an alias there. And do RDS company ID. Let's save that. Not select anything. Let's press return here so you can see it. And then preview it. Okay. Did we not? Yeah, this should be. Oh, do we not? We have a group by RDS. Okay, here it seems like we have. This is like kind of a good one, right? Where you can see that we have two records here, and we're getting the present values from each of the records, right? And then the same thing over here. All right, so this is looking pretty good. Okay, so this is the idea, right? Like get down the idea, and then you can always, iterate to getting to that solution. And that general idea is just we're going to do a union all. We're going to group by. We have that issue of we want to hold on to our foreign keys, so we split these into separate columns, right? And then we do that same technique of taking the max so that we can get the present values. Right, so that's the idea of integration, and to me, this is the most challenging step. All right, so, yeah, then the rest is really just like adding in some DBT tooling. All right, so I will stop talking.